middle?
I think we want to be in the middle, right? I think the kingdom's position is to have a strong partnership with all of its partners and friends, and that's something that is a value proposition of the kingdom that we want to grow. But on tariffs, I think depending on what objectives an economy has, it's been used as a tool, so long as it is objective-driven and time-bound. An economy has the right to build resilience or leverage or give space for the private sector to grow some competitive advantage, or to invest in adding new competitive advantages so that a local industry can start. So it's really about the details of tariffs, what it would look like, assessing its impact, and then figuring out how to deal with it. The important thing is to keep dialogue on the table and keep the orderly, respectful discussion going and maintaining it, even if it's been absent for a while or not where it should be, and continue working on it. The Kingdom values its partnership with all of its economies. Since Vision 2030, we've played an even larger role in more domains than oil and gas, diplomacy, and foreign aid and assistance, because we understand better through Vision 2030 what our economy needs and society needs for us to unlock its potential.
Both with U.S. and China?
U.S. and China and others.
President Lagarde, President Trump yesterday said that the EU does not treat the U.S. fairly on trade and that he has some big complaints. Is that true?
This is a true or false question, by the way.
Is it true that the EU has not been fair with the U.S.?
There is no way I can say yes or no, okay? What I believe is that he's looking very carefully at surplus versus deficit in the current account, and in the trade balance in particular, focusing on that. And I think that you have to look very carefully under the hood, as Kristalina was saying. You have to look at the goods exchanges, you have to look at the services exchanges, you have to look at the capital account. It cannot just be black and white. What is true is that there has to be negotiations, there has to be trade relationships that are organized in a framework that is giving confidence to the partners. It cannot be about, removing all the rules, ignoring the institutions. The world has, 190 plus countries that are members of the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, 191. And it's about all of us operating together, as Tharman said earlier on. So, yes, you sit at the table, yes, you negotiate, yes, some countries are in a stronger position than others, but we all need each other. If there is one thing that the Europeans have learned over the course of time since the end of the Second World War, is that you cannot go alone. You have to work together. You have to respect each other's, and you have to understand each other's. For that, you sit at the table.
Going to see over time is a reflection in trade and economic relations of a geopolitically changing world. More regional cooperation, more cooperation based on supply chains, more engagement that allows countries to achieve their objectives. And in our institution, we look into how we can support regions. How can we work more closely with ASEAN? How can we work more closely with the Gulf Cooperation Council? So we can provide the analytical and policy encouragement for that kind of practical cooperation. I mean, look, we were many thousand years ago just a handful of people on this planet. Today we are 8 billion. How did we get from there to here? Well, by collaborating and competing. And I think that there is no way we can wipe out collaboration from the future of humanity.
On that note, Mr. President, I thought there would be an applause for that. On that note, Mr. President, trade and industrial policy, as you just heard from the managing director, are very linked. You have some strong opinions here on industrial policy, I know.
Well, I think,
Please.
whether it's tariffs or subsidies or the other forms of the new industrial policies that are now in the vogue, the fact is they're being driven largely by politics and geopolitics rather than by any powerful new understanding of economics, or any new evidence or any reappraisal of economics. And I think the jury is out as to whether this is going to succeed in lifting standards of living for ordinary people, for the middle class, and lifting economic performance for countries. It's happening by way of drift and tit-for-tat action. And we're in a very unstable situation now, quite frankly. So I think we have to take a step back. There is a case for industrial policy, and it starts from recognizing that innovation is the key driver for long-term growth. And innovation comes from capabilities. So the industrial policies that have succeeded in the past, and I think are still entirely relevant, are industrial policies that involve developing your own capabilities, R&D, skills, developing cluster synergies amongst firms, developing your own capabilities rather than constraining someone else's efforts to develop capabilities. It's about developing your own capabilities rather than constraining another country or the rest of the world. Because the difference between the two is that the first spurs innovation, and it spurs innovation through competition, and the second stifles innovation, and it stifles long-term growth. The second point, which is, may seem old-fashioned, but is still entirely relevant, and all the evidence still supports the proposition that global interdependence and some specialization that each country engages in is good for everyone. You don't have to be a purist, you don't have to know what Ricardo said, but the fact is, we all do better when we specialize at what we are good at and develop skill in what we're good at. And it's very hard to depart from that. The whole history of import substituting industrialization, which we saw in Latin America, we saw in parts of the developing world, and which we're now seeing in parts of the advanced world, has not been a pretty history. In fact, in general, it has led to massive inefficiency, which means costs for ordinary taxpayers, and big losses. Big losses. So develop our own capabilities, do it in areas where we have some advantage, some accumulated skills, some potential to succeed and develop scale, and complement each other in an interdependent world. There is a further very important case today for industrial policy, and that is we need to find ways of scaling up action on climate and the associated crises of biodiversity and a global water cycle that's out of sync, out of kilter. It requires the public sector, it requires state intervention to front-load investment, to be able to front-load even the demand for new innovations in green energy and all the other technologies that are going to get us to net zero. If you leave it to the markets, it's going to take too long, it's going to be too incremental, and in the meantime, the turning points kick in climate change, and we get into a much more dangerous world. From time to time, countries will feel they can put climate action on the back burner, but climate change is not on a back burner for you or for anyone else. The more we put it on the back, the more we put climate action on the back burner, the more we burn in future, the more the costs are going to be to address the situation, and the greater the inequality that we're going to face. So we've got to press ahead with addressing climate change, and it does require industrial policies involving public investment, involving subsidies, involving taxation policies, so that we build scale early and drive down the costs for ordinary consumers of new technologies. It's a very important contemporary reason why we need industrial policy.
So Larry mentioned the D word, debt and deficits. And it's a whole nother subject for another panel that we don't have time to get into. But I am curious, show of hands, since we're talking about the global economy, in the near term, how many of you have put sovereign debt levels, high sovereign debt levels, in your top 5 lists of risks for the global outlook? Yeah. Everybody. What about geopolitical tensions? Top 5?
Yeah.
No. Why not, Larry?
I mean, obviously it represents idiosyncratic risk, so we always have to put that into your forecast. Look at, if we're going to really grow the economy of the world, it's not about focusing on really tariffs or all these issues. I agree with Tarman related to this industrial policy, but all of this, whether it's the deficits or transforming an economy, it's going to have to be done by hope. The more the global population is hopeful about the future,
Yeah.
there's more consumption in that environment. I mean, when we talk about China, what is China? One of the fundamental problems of China is it has the highest savings rates of any major economy in the world. 38% today, it was as high as 50%. This is why they have to be more dependent on exports. I mean, so for China needs to be developing more hope within its country, and I think they're focusing on this right now. And if they could do that, they're going to have more domestic consumption. You know, we talk about tariffs, and what do we do about it? You know, I could go back and look at Europe and say that if Europe can solve its own problems, not focusing on the problems that the U.S. may impose on it, but focusing on their own issues. And Christine talked about it. It is about opening up the capital markets union, the banking union, to make Europe really one single market. I mean, it's a myth right now. Europe is a myth. Okay, it's a beautiful myth, but it's not working. It is not working to compete.
President Lagarde's going to take back her invitation.
No, it's not working relative to the strength of the United States, the innovation of the United States, the entrepreneurialism of the United States, the ability to pivot. And then if you look at China, its entrepreneurialism, its development. Europe needs to be in the same footing. And here we are now in 2025. We're now 16 years post a financial crisis, and I don't see Europe moving forward enough. I see Europe still focusing on backward looking too much. But I do believe all of elements are there, and that's why I started off. I'm more optimistic. But in that, to be optimistic, you have to admit your problems.
Okay.
Final minute, yes, I know you must respond.
Okay.
I was being provocative.
No, but fair enough. And that's exactly the good point about now, is that it's provocative. Because I think Europe is not a myth. Europe is not a basket case. Europe is a fantastic case for transformation. And I'm going to quote a report that was issued by the IMF, Kristalina. And I agree with you on that, Larry. I agree. If Europe was a single market, as it claims to be, if it was, then it would remove the equivalent custom duties of 40% on its goods that are transacted within Europe, and 110% of custom tariffs on its services. So I agree with you that it is not operating and functioning as a single market. I'm not the author of the Letta report, he pointed it out. And Mario Draghi is pointing out what needs to be done about it. The real question for the Europeans, as I have said, corporates and policymakers alike, is get on and do it.
Get it done.
Okay, we have 1 minute left, so that means like a short answer, really short, like 10 seconds from everybody. We talked a lot about the risks, inflation, tariffs, industrial policy, deficits. One opportunity for growth in 2025 that you're thinking about, Mr. President?
I think the most neglected dimension of strategy nationally in most parts of the world is social policy. You need social policy on an industrial scale, much more than industrial policy in the narrow sense. And that means maximizing human potential in every segment of the population. It means finding ways of recreating social compacts so that people feel some sense of solidarity, even between different ethnic groups, different nationalities. And it means, very importantly, thereby building the basis for political consensus to keep economies open and interdependent. And those three things must go together. The economic strategy of openness, the social policy of not leaving things to a social market, but intervening to help everyone uplift themselves, and the politics that then allows you to carry on being open. If any one of those fails, each of them falls apart.
Managing Director.
Remove the self-inflicted injuries. There is so much that is on the way of productivity and growth that comes from red tape, comes from misguided policies, comes from poor implementation of good policies that has to be taken out. And I know you say one thing, but I have to say two, and make sure that artificial intelligence is not a privilege of few and not accessible for the rest of the world.
President Lagarde.
I would second what Kristalina just said. I think that we have not discussed very much artificial intelligence. It's been much discussed at the World Economic Forum this week. And we are not exactly certain what the potential is. We think that it's huge. We believe that it is going to have massive impact. And I think we should make sure that it's used for good to improving the state of the world and the world for all of us.
Yes.
Larry.
You know, we spend so much time focusing on all the problems, and when we discuss problems, we solve problems. So I believe it is a great process discussing problems because we solve problems. But because we solve problems, there should be even greater hope. I mean, the world is better today than it's been 10 years ago and 20 years ago. We lifted more people. There's more opportunity. There's more technology transformations. Some of it is very fearful, but I just look back at the last 20 years, and I'm more hopeful today than I ever been. And it is our responsibility to provide that hope to everybody and lift more people.
Yep.
Your Excellency.
So the reason I didn't raise my hand earlier is because I think today we have more clarity on what we need to discuss and resolve, and there is signs of more optimism relative to where we were last year. So I'd say optimism by choice. Optimism is not just a gut feeling or a reaction to an environment. It could be a strategic decision. And like any decision, you can invest and then put in the hard work to make that investment reap its returns. Number two is putting in the hard work. I think reform and transformation is not a 9-to-5 job. It requires people working night and day. I was asked by your colleague, Steve, before one of the panels, I don't know why he asked us, but he asked us what extreme sports we play. I blanked out, which is depressing. But then the first thing that came to mind was Saudi Vision 2030. Not because of what we're doing, but because of the so many young Saudi men and women who are working 12, 14, 16-hour shifts every day to make this transformation count.
Thank you all. And we end where we started, with the optimism, and it's why it's been a really rich World Economic Forum Davos this year. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you. Thank you.
And please stay seated. Please stay seated, everybody, because we have two more things before we close everything out. We have a very special, exciting, newsworthy announcement from His Excellency, from the Kingdom. And then if you would stay seated, right after that, we are going to hear from the World Economic Forum President. Please.
I'd like to start by first thanking Professor Schwab, Boerge, and the entire World Economic Forum community for putting on another hugely successful annual meeting. Last year in April, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the World Economic Forum hosted a very successful special meeting in Riyadh under the patronage of His Royal Highness Crown Prince and Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And now, building on the success of this meeting, Saudi Arabia and the World Economic Forum are happy to announce that we will host a regular World Economic Forum global meeting in the Kingdom. This is a testament to the global platform for dialogue, collaboration, and innovation that Saudi Arabia has become and that the World Economic Forum continues to be. This meeting represents a significant opportunity to further unite the world in capturing the immense potential that lies ahead. In this critical juncture for the global economy, we're not only inspired by the opportunities before us, but also deeply confident that our collective efforts will forge a brighter, more inclusive, and more prosperous future for all. We look forward to welcoming the global community again in Saudi Arabia in the spring of 2026. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now I'd like to welcome to the stage the Forum's CEO and President, Boerge Brende.
First and foremost, thank you to a great panel. We're privileged to have thought leaders like you joining us on our last day. And special thank you to my dear friend, Minister Faisal. We had also an amazing meeting in the Kingdom, and we're looking forward to coming back in the spring of 2026. I think we all realize during this week that we came together in Davos at a time of immense consequence and uncertainty. Political, geopolitical, and macroeconomic landscape all are shifting under our feet. At the very moment, the clock is quickly ticking down to meet critical political priorities. Driving economic growth, reducing carbon emissions, finding ways to end conflict, all cannot wait. And the only way to progress on these issues is by working together. But our cooperative approaches may need to adapt to a new, more uncertain era. There is a new political reality that we are faced with. We will need to be innovative and creative and work with each other, even if we don't see eye to eye on everything. Our week in Davos showed that this is possible. Leaders from around the world, from the public and private sectors, with different views, gathered to show how we can collaborate. Even if nations do compete, and fiercely compete, there will be areas where there is overlapping in the interest, and those areas we really need to strike and find deals to make the world a better place. I got a list from my colleagues on all the achievements during this week that I was planning to read because it's very impressive. But I know that everyone also are eager to get on with their business. But I can tell you that there were 50 to 60 concrete outcomes of this meeting, like skills accelerator, upskilling, reskilling. There were diplomatic sessions about the West Balkans, Myanmar, how US and China can collaborate better. It was also about how we can strengthen and have more resilient trade and investments moving forward. I'm just sharing some of this, but we will share on our website all the concrete outcomes. So to close, the week, I think, is putting us on a strong course for the year ahead, a year that will have immense consequence. Because the progress we make over the coming months will not only deliver results in the near term, but will shape our course for years to come. So again, thank you to all our participants. Thank you for being with us here in Davos, and thank you for making our platform at the World Economic Forum even more relevant in a more fractured and polarized world. We will try to continue, and we will continue to work for more collaboration and cooperation. Thank you, and safe travels back home.